'Tis the season to shine with H&M. Discover the holiday collection and find fashionable pieces for your wardrobe or for under the tree. Get inspired and dazzle with this year's glam. From tuxedo styles, bow detailed pieces, impressive prints, and more. From unforgettable looks to unforgettable gifts. With fashion finds to home decor, find it all at H&M. Treat your loved ones and yourself this season. Shop in-store or at hm.com.
This episode is brought to you by Vital Farms. Isn't it bullshit to have to question where your food comes from? At Vital Farms, you can trace your pasture-raised eggs all the way back to the source, the pasture. On the side of each pasture-raised carton of eggs, you'll find the name of the farm where your eggs were laid. And when you look the farm up on their website, you'll get a peek at all the sunshine, fresh air, and open space the hens enjoy. Learn more and find out where to buy them at vitalfarms.com. Vital Farms, keeping it bullshit-free.
This episode is brought to you by Kia's first 3-row all-electric SUV, the Kia EV9, with available all-wheel drive and seating for up to 7 adults, with a 0 to 60 speed that thrills you 1 minute, and available reclining lounge seats that unwind you the next. Visit kia.com/EV9 to learn more. Ask your Kia dealer for availability. No system, no matter how advanced, can compensate for all driver error and or driving conditions. Always drive safely.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. That's the sound of switching your business to Shopify, the global commerce platform that supercharges your selling. Harness the best converting checkout and same intuitive features, trusted apps, and powerful analytics used by the world's leading brands. Stop leaving sales on the table. Discover why millions trust Shopify to build, grow, and run their business. Sign up today for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/tech23.
'Twas the first night home for the holidays, and all through your town, not one thumb was quiet. A lot of swiping going down. You created the perfect Bumble profile with care in hopes that your dream guy or gal may be out there. When what to your wandering eyes should appear but a ton of faces you haven't seen in years. There's a rando from high school, your ex from 8th grade, a kid you used to babysit, and your literal Uncle Dave. As cringe as this feels, the only thing worse would be if one of them stumbled upon your profile first. But there's no need to panic or erase your face from the app. You can go incognito with one simple tap. Disappear from the others till you say they're a match, and have more fun finding your next hometown catch. With peace of mind and your profile hidden from sight, happy holidating to all, and to all a good night. Happy holidating with incognito mode from Bumble. Download today.
Welcome to the Human Capital Leadership Podcast. We're your source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We share our own original research, explore industry trends, and interview executives and thought leaders from across the globe. Please join us often for practitioner-oriented content around all things leadership, HR, talent management, organizational development, and change management. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with the Human Capital Leadership Podcast. Welcome to the Human Capital Leadership Podcast. In this HCL podcast episode, I talk with Brianna Rooney about the importance of tech in recruiting. Brianna Rooney, welcome to the conversation today.
Thank you, John. Nice to see you.
It is a pleasure to be with you. You're joining us from the Thousands Oaks area of Southern California. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And today we're going to be talking about the importance of tech in recruiting. You know, as AI advances and, ChatGPT and Claude and other AI platforms are coming out, it's only, providing a greater, more rapid shift in how we're utilizing tech in the recruitment space, as well as many other areas. Yeah. And there's all sorts of other tools that are also very important. So we're going to unpack this and explore this together today. And I'm really excited for this conversation. As we get started, I wanted to share Brianna's bio with everybody. A woman serial entrepreneur, Brianna Rooney, is the founder and CEO of Talent Perch, Thriversity, and Millionaire Recruiter and Techies. A firm acquired its team in 2021. Passionate about all things recruiting, she also co-hosts a podcast called Talent Takeover Unfiltered that brings respect and awareness to the industry. Brianna's businesses offer companies and individuals a 360-degree solution to recruiting and sourcing. Thriversity's mission is to turn anyone into an efficient and successful recruiter, while Talent Perch focuses on providing solutions to the most daunting business hiring goals. She believes you can be as successful at work as you are at home. You don't have to choose. Be present and rock everything you do. I love that. I'm a father of 6 children myself.
6. Oh my gosh.
It's always an adventure, right? Kids are amazing and also stressful, and it's a really wonderful thing. I totally agree. Be present in whatever you're doing. So when we're talking about work-life balance or work-life integration or whatever term you like to use, I think the key thing is just like be present with where you're at and what you're doing, and be with the people you're with, and that solves a lot of problems.
Yeah, agreed. Something you can't get back is time.
Yeah.
So it's like, I've heard both sides. I've heard people are like, hey, I'm going to put my head down so I can then be with my kids. And I'm like, actually, I'm going to be with my kids now and, work
right.
almost a little bit later. So yeah, it's an interesting balance and it's a choice.
'Twas the first night home for the holidays, and all through your town, not one thumb was quiet. A lot of swiping going down. You created the perfect Bumble profile with care in hopes that your dream guy or gal may be out there. When what to your wandering eyes should appear but a ton of faces you haven't seen in years. There's a rando from high school, your ex from 8th grade, a kid you used to babysit, and your literal Uncle Dave. As cringe as this feels, the only thing worse would be if one of them stumbled upon your profile first. But there's no need to panic or erase your face from the app. You can go incognito with one simple tap. Disappear from the others till you say they're a match, and have more fun finding your next hometown catch. With peace of mind and your profile hidden from sight, happy holidating to all, and to all a good night. Happy holidating with incognito mode from Bumble. Download today.
This episode is brought to you by Klaviyo, the platform that powers smarter digital relationships. With Klaviyo, you can activate all your customer data in real time, connect seamlessly with your customers across all channels, guide your marketing strategy with AI-powered insights, recommendations, and automated assistance. Deliver experiences that feel individually designed at scale and grow your business faster. Power smarter digital relationships with Klaviyo. Learn more at klaviyo.com/Spotify. That's KLAVIYO.com/Spotify.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Well, that's a little bit of Brianna's background. Brianna, anything else you would like to share with me or the audience by way of your personal context before we dive on in?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like recruiting at this point is in my DNA, and all I want to do, and hopefully I feel like you're on the same mission, is change the way the world views recruiting. It's super important. It's and we don't always get, to be on, we're kind of on the sidelines. It's like, you need us when you need us, you throw us away when you want to throw us away. So, hopefully it's more of a constant, like we see HR is, hopefully talent still holds strong.
Yeah, the talent acquisition piece of HR, HR has worked really hard over the years to try to get a seat at the table, right?
Yeah.
To the elevation of the HR function and the CHRO role or the people ops role or whatever. I think we've done a good job overall of getting HR a seat at the table, but within the HR world, talent acquisition and recruiting sometimes still gets a back seat, which is kind of ironic considering that's the input, right, to the organization to have the great people to do the work that the organization needs to do. And it seems like a lot of times, when I talk to people, there's kind of this simplistic understanding of recruiting, and kind of, it's almost a condescending or diminishing view of it, right? And it sounds like that's your experience too. Tell us a little bit more about that and why you feel like that's inaccurate and what we can do about it.
Yeah, it feels like it's still transactional,
Right.
So I'm definitely external, right? So like, I feel like if there's ever going to be transactions happening, it's definitely external. But on the side from that, it's like they treat us as a gray area all the time. So it's like, hey, if they want to do something technically illegal, not ethical, stuff like that, we'll call in these hired guns, and that's kind of its own separate, fight. But yeah, talent is definitely responsible. The talent team is responsible also for retention. We're the
Right.
first person you see and probably the last person you see throughout the interview process. So like we're also brand ambassadors, we're product managers. Like we do so much for the organization. And I think just like HR, if we could have a seat at the table, we could actually talk really like, hey, let's talk about capacity planning. Let's really like fight and have a conversation with the hiring managers and say, hey, do you have a plan for this hire for the next 12 months? What are they going to accomplish? Because I now need to tell that to the candidates to make sure that we're on the same page. And in order to always, I think, stay lean, I think if speaking of leaning in, if they leaned into recruiting teams, they could really, I think like layoffs probably wouldn't happen as often, because what happens, I would love to hear your thought on this, Sean, is like, I feel like when there's a heavy project, the response is let's hire.
Yep.
But technically, leaner teams can, I think, get more things done as long as the communication's strong and it shows like, hey, what's everyone's genius? What are we doing? Where's our gap? Maybe a contractor's a better idea than the full-time, stuff like that.
Yeah, and the role of recruiters and thinking about holistic talent acquisition as a critical piece of the total employee experience, right? And from start to end, and oftentimes it's the recruiter that really is that integral piece to get someone plugged into the system in the first place. And if there's a disconnect, obviously that's going to cause potential problems down the line, right? As someone's getting onboarded and that first, period that they're in the organization working with this team, a lot hangs on that initial experience with the recruiter and the recruiter's relationship with the hiring manager, et cetera. All of that's just so important. And if we kind of just look our nose down at recruiting, as some people tend to do, we're shooting ourselves in the foot, right? We're just selling ourselves short in terms of the potential we have to create a really dynamic team that can help us do really cool stuff and create great things and provide value to the market.
100%. So I would say that most companies, maybe like 90% of companies say, hey, the most single important thing we do is hiring. Hello, recruiting's right here then, right? Like why don't we have a seat at the table? So it's definitely ironic. But it's been a challenge. I mean, I've been in this industry for like 15 years at this point. And so, which is why I switched to a little more learning and development, not switched, but added an aspect of it. And I was like, hey, you know what? Maybe I'll train. If we train an industry as a whole, then I naturally you have to have respect, right? But it's really clawing, I think, to get at the seat of the table, but I love that you brought up HR as you guys had to go through the same exact thing. So it takes a while.
Yeah. And one thing that's been interesting, I think, is just over the last, what is it now, 8-9 months ago, the launch of ChatGPT, all these learning language models, and AI has been a thing for a long time, obviously, but it's resurfaced as like a really important piece that more and more people are talking about. More and more people are now finding a way to use it and integrate it. And one of the very first things I saw in the HR space as soon as ChatGPT was released, is like, oh, we're going to automate away jobs like recruiter jobs and those sorts of things. And I just shake my head at that. I'm just like, why in the world would this mean that? What was your initial reaction as some of these new tools started to come online, at the end of 2022?
Honestly, I laughed a little bit because, and I'm sure you can relate to this, all recruiting tools are made by someone that's not in recruiting. So that's always a very interesting thing to me, and and what they say is, oh, well, I shadowed a recruiter for 6 months. Okay, well, great. But no, I honestly, like, for a moment, I would say I was more fearful for way back when. Oh my God, I can't think of this company's name. But anyways, it was a company that essentially, instead of like the 20% normal contingency recruiter, it's called Hired. Hired?
Yep.
When Hired came up, I got nervous about that. I'm like, oh my gosh, now engineers can just go and basically say their price, say their salary, and they're going to meet, on this platform, and it's going to be like really straightforward, and all of a sudden recruiters aren't going to have jobs. So I remember way back when getting really nervous for that. And then I very quickly realized this is actually, you're cutting out the human aspect of it, which it sounds great in theory. Everyone's probably had a bad experience with the recruiter, but at the end of the day, what they don't realize is the recruiter is actually like your career confidant, right? They set you up, they prep you, they get you to the front of the line. And they also, what I don't think a lot of people realize they do, is they they keep the company in the best light ever, because companies insides are broken. When it comes to the interview process and candidate experience, it's actually the recruiter that helps shift things in the right direction. I mean, I can't tell you how many excuses I have for companies be like, oh, no, they're going through a release. Oh, no, they're on vacation. They're sorry for the disconnect. There's a lot of feelings that come into that. And that's a human thing, that it's never going to be a bot. So when ChatGPT came out, I was like, oh, this is like super interesting. Like, how can I use this? It was never of, how is this going to replace me? It's just, how can I use this? And I think that's what we all have to think about these tools it's supposed to be an extension, almost like an assistant for us.
Yeah, well, and that's something that definitely has emerged over the last 8+ months, is this idea of, will there be some displacement? Sure. Some aspects of jobs will be displaced. Perhaps there will be even some jobs that will be displaced. But in most cases, we're talking about augmenting performance, augmenting the potential capacity of an individual worker through these tools, right? And so now I can be more effective, more efficient, more productive as I learn how to leverage the tool, and it actually enhances my value to the organization as one who knows how to leverage the tools, as opposed to just something where all of a sudden my job's going away. And whether we're talking about talent acquisition and recruiting or whatever, like any other job, right? It's the same conversation that's been happening again and again and again in the labor market around what's the implications of ChatGPT and other disruptive technologies. So again, and that's just one example of the types of tech in recruiting that is kind of disrupting the space a little bit, or at least challenging people to think differently about how we've done things in the past. Let's broaden it though now and talk a little bit more about just tech in general. What types of tech trends are you seeing in the recruitment space? What do you see as the most useful tools, and how do you see things shifting, over the next 6 months to a year?
Yeah, it seems as if everything's trying to come together, because there's lots of little pieces, lots of different tech that has to come together, right? So there's like the gems of the world that really came out, and they started like sequencing. Okay, here, it's an extension on LinkedIn. This is great. We have their emails, we have their access. We can put them in an email sequence. And then naturally, the more people see your email, like what it says, like the fourth or fifth one's actually opened, or actually responded to. So that technology is massive. And I think in something like that, it's when that came out, you're like, oh my gosh, wow, I don't actually have to do all this admin work to make sure like I had that 5 or 6 touches, or hey, I can be on vacation and my emails can still be going out, and like I'll still feel relevant. So I think tools like that, it helps bring like a work-life balance too. Now there's something that I'm pretty obsessed about, which is Covey. Have you heard of Covey yet? Yeah. So Covey Scout, and I'm going to contradict myself, because if I were to pick one job in recruiting, I would be a sourcer. I love sourcing. I love tangent sourcing. I love finding people no one can find, all of that stuff. Okay. So when I first heard that there was a bot sourcing, I was like, no. I refuse. No. But the interesting part about this is that it takes your human brain. So it takes all of your thought process. So you're not only putting in the job description, you're putting in your hiring manager notes, you're putting in your own thought process as to what you would want to search for a Boolean. So for example, I want all startups or unicorns from 2012. Stuff like that. Like that would take a long time to go get a list, put it in, right? But you're telling this bot to do it, and then it finds it, and then also does your email sequences. So it's a very cool, as close to human process as possible. It's kind of sifting through things for you. And then you now have the time to do what you're supposed to do, which is what I don't think people get enough credit for, is having the candidate experience, the talking to the candidate. Like more often than not, I'm placing people that never even knew about the job I had, didn't know about the company, didn't know that they even wanted that industry, and so that's the cool part about recruiting, and that you should work with a recruiter, because there's so many, like you go into this thought process of, I want this and I want this and I want that. You don't really know what you want until you have it, or until you don't have it, right? So I think that's the cool process there. So those are two just kind of tech things in recruiting that you have to embrace, you have to enjoy.
That's really cool. And yeah, from the sourcing piece, as you were just describing, I have people reach out to me sometimes. I'm like, oh, I never considered that.
Yeah.
It's not even in my range of like awareness at all. And of course, if I'm not even aware, I'm not going to be looking. And
Right.
but sometimes they're intriguing, and a new opportunity perhaps. And the reality is the labor market today is much more fluid than it was a generation ago. Like people are shifting. Um, you know, Companies need to learn to be more agile to allow different career pathways and developmental pathways for individuals. And if they don't, people are just leaving to go to new, interesting opportunities that perhaps doesn't even align with a traditional career path as we conceived of it previously, right? And so that's one of the things that sourcers do a lot of work in. And having something like an AI-driven chatbot tool that can do a lot of that nitty gritty legwork for you so you can spend more time on the human component of actually communicating with these individuals. I mean, that's huge. I imagine, you would much rather spend time with individuals around that candidate experience rather than doing, the initial legwork of researching and compiling and, getting all these emails set up and all of that.
Yeah, it's a heavy lift. And what I think is interesting too is like you also have to keep on top of trends. Okay, well, I got to read all these newsletters, listen to the podcasts, which are all like super important. Again, it's like you run out of like when do you do all of these things? And naturally, I think that what we've seen over the course of the years, and that we're just now talking about more, is how drained everybody is. And it's like if
Yeah.
you're drained, you're naturally not your best self. You're not giving it your all, and there's going to be missteps. And it's like this constant hamster wheel. So it's like, yeah, AI is like welcome. I absolutely welcome AI. I do think some things are a little, out there. Like it's like, okay, I don't know about that. It seems like we're a little tool heavy, so we definitely have to make choices. But that's just competition, right? And that's kind of the fun part.
Well, yeah, we're early stage for all these tools, right?
Mhm.
And so there, I don't know. I kind of stopped looking because it seemed like every week there was like 150 new AI tools being released, and so at a certain point, I'm just like, okay, that's too much. I'm gonna like see what kind of floating to the top and I'll take a look, whatever. Yeah, there's only so much we can do, and you can very quickly get yourself bogged down in the tools. So by all means, spend some time exploring, navigating the different opportunities, leverage what makes sense to you. There's intense competition in the space. We're going to see what sticks around and what is going to be most useful. But there's just so much experimentation in the space right now. A lot of these tools aren't even all that useful, but they could be potentially useful, maybe in 6 months or a year from now. So all of that's really, really interesting. But just being open to the opportunity to leverage and utilize these tools is important. Having that mindset, I think, is important, but then also recognizing, what are the small number of tools that you're going to use. That's reasonable. I can use, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 tools consistently every day. Once you get past that, that's probably too much, and you're probably just getting overwhelmed with tools, and it's not going to be helpful. It's actually going to be distracting. So that's a hard thing to navigate, especially right now as we see more and more of these tools being released constantly.
Yeah, adopting the tool itself is a little distracting. Like I
Yeah.
think about over the years how many random tools I've used for my team. Like, this is amazing, we have to use it. But if they don't adopt it, it's really irrelevant. It's irrelevant what tools
Yeah.
are available. But yeah, you have to have like those power users. Like, hey, let's power through this. You have to have the time to do it, and you have to be super dedicated. And I think that's really important. And what's interesting, it's always like what I like to do when I think about a tool and what I want to grab is, what do I really like? If I had a magic wand, what is something I don't want to do that I
Yeah.
don't think is efficient? And I think that that's kind of where you start, and every single person works differently. So I definitely don't think it's a one size fits all. But yeah, like I start from there. Like, what admin stuff do I despise? But what admin stuff opens my eyes to other things?
Mm-hmm.
So there's definitely some admin things that I choose to keep because I learn. Like okay, example, building a biz dev list. So and I've tried, and I've had someone just deliver it, 300 companies, bam, hiring managers, emails, all those things. And you're like, wow, that's really cool. But what I realized was I love building the list myself because I get to see trends. I get to see what industry is popping up faster I get to see movement on LinkedIn as to like who went here, who went there. And I think that that mindset is what sets me apart from my competition. But again, it's getting a business list nice? Yeah, of course.
Yeah, of course, because it does take a lot of time and a lot of work, but there's all those kind of intangible side impacts of going through the process yourself, right? So that's something you always have to balance. Something else you just said a few minutes ago that I think is really important to highlight here as we're having this conversation around tech in the recruiting space, really tech in any space, is people just feeling overwhelmed and burned out. And I think recruiters, disproportionately, that applies to recruiters more than some other types of jobs. It's a high pressure kind of a job. There's a lot of pressure. It's constantly shifting, constantly moving. As we talked about earlier in the conversation today, it's not always the highest level of respect that you're receiving from other organizational leaders. And it can be a really challenging, fraught space with a lot of pressure. And so balancing, utilizing tech to relieve that pressure is really important, while also not allowing yourself to get too overwhelmed by all the different tech options that it just becomes more distracting. And it seems like this really nice, quick, easy fix. And the reality is it's not. And it just actually further distracts you and further takes away from your ability to do the work that you need to do. So any thoughts on that? Like how we balance leveraging the tech to reduce the pressure, to increase our efficiencies and productivity while not allowing ourselves to get overwhelmed by it?
Yeah, I think so. I think of like Greenhouse, for example, like that ATS. Now there's Prelude, Cat Conley brought Prelude. And but yet I feel like that connection, like how it's supposed to make life easier, there's some holes there. And I think that as we were getting tools and we're seeing integrations, we feel that it should be seamless, but it's not. And so I think we have to realize that as we're having these tools, there's going to be stuff that happens all the time, and it gets very frustrating. Like the funny thing is, like, we use our computers every day, right? When the internet's down, oh my God, is your life over? So it's kind of like that with AI, is that once you're getting in the groove of using it, it's like you're losing that thought process, and then you're not used to it. So then when it's broken, or you don't think, oh wait, maybe this isn't working correctly, we still have to treat it kind of like a human. It has bugs just like humans do. And I think that's been a big issue and frustration, especially when you're adopting things, because then all of a sudden we're quick to ditch things as well. So it's like, hey, understand that tech is human, even though it's not supposed to be, it still is, and you still have to have a thought process. So I think we want to turn off the thought process, and that alone feels very overwhelming, because you're like, wait, I got to watch a bot, I got to watch a human, I got to watch myself, I got to, and I think that that's a lot. For me, how I deal with that is I'm a big journaler. So I do growth and success journaling every day, and any little mini win or any little thing I'm feeling overwhelmed with, I spend 10 minutes a day, and it's not a lot, but it's my 10 minutes, and so that's kind of how I deal with that.
Yeah, and just something simple, some sort of mindfulness practice, whether it's journaling or just meditating, deep breathing, taking a moment to reflect. These things are really important when we find ourselves in a rapidly changing space, where we're trying to juggle a whole lot of things, and it's really, really easy to get overwhelmed, and to just kind of jump from thing to thing and fire to fire, and not take the time to kind of take a step back and look holistically at the space, right? Whatever we're talking about, very, very important. And I think in the recruiting space, again, because of the pressure, because of the workload, because of the potential burnout, because of all of the tools that are becoming available, it's super tempting to think, oh, now I have this tool to do this thing for me. I can check that box. I can turn it on, not think about it, and move on to my next thing. That's, like you said, that's not how it works, especially at the early stages, like we're at right now with a lot of these AI tools. The companies that are putting them out are experimenting with them just as much as we are using them. Like the use case for all these things, is still in flux. And so we can't just turn this thing on and then walk away and feel like we're good. If you do that, you're probably going to have all sorts of other problems and unintended consequences that emerge from that. So you got to be very, very careful. Well, Brianna, this has been a really fun conversation. I note the time. We've only scratched the surface. There's so much more we could explore together today. But
That's so much.
before we wrap things up and you get on with your busy day, I wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, your team, and then give us a final word on the topic for today.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So you can, of course, find me, Brianna Rooney, on LinkedIn. But if you need help with hiring, it's talentperch.com. If you would like help with training, whether that's, your recruiters or please, your hiring managers, you can find that on thriversity.io. And then, the Millionaire Recruiter YouTube, I like to put out content to pay it forward constantly. So thank you for always listening. And same with the podcast. I feel like now I need you on my podcast, Talent Takeover Unfiltered, where we're trying to, we don't want to vent too much. We definitely give some goodies, but there's those moments where I just got to get it out. So that's kind of what that's about. But as far as tech goes, you can't be afraid of anything. And I think that everyone has a unique perspective, a unique gift, and you have to stand really tall on that and think, how can I enhance that with tech? Because the bottom line is, if you don't embrace it, you will get left behind. But it's not the bot that's leaving you behind. It's just because your other people are going to become more efficient and they're going to have a better work-life balance. And so that's why I really, really highly suggest you guys use tech.
Wonderful. Thank you, Brianna. It's been a real pleasure. I encourage the audience to reach out, get connected, find out more about what Brianna and her team can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week. Thanks again for joining us for this episode of the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. I hope you stay healthy and safe and that you have a great week.